Welcome to Beyond Pink. Beyond Pink is a platform for the new urban Indian woman to celebrate the stories emerging from her situation as she deals with the hairpin bends in her life her way. She is a serial entrepreneur, workplace evangelist, mentor, occasional writer, and a mother of a 6-year-old. Finalist of Cartier's Women's Initiative Award 2012 and voted one of the most powerful women in Indian business. My guest tonight on the Beyond Pink Chat Show is the very passionate and motivated founder of Flexi Moms, Sairee Chahal. Sairee, welcome to Beyond Pink.
Thank you. Thank you, Sangeeta.
So let me start with my first question. I've been very curious that you run an organization which is all about flexible timings, and here you are working, I don't know what, 16 hours a day. So what do you think? How do you achieve balance in your home and work?
So balance, one, to me is a personal thing. I think everyone needs to go out and find their own version of balance. Two, I call it reverse flex. Yes, I do the long hours, but I also love some parts of my life, and some of them are sacrosanct. My sleep, for example, is really important. I mean, I give status to sleep over food, so that happens with me a lot. So I try and catch up as much as possible. I also have learned over the years to say no, just say no, and I think that's the simplest way to find your version of balance or what works for you. There are a lot of things that are expected of you. Just figure out what you expect of yourself, and I think that sort of keeps you going. So there's never a perfect day. There will be days that will be long, there will be things that won't work out, and that happens to all of us, irrespective of what we are doing and what profession we are at, whether we are a housewife or whether we work in an office or whether we are an entrepreneur. I think that goes on, but the thing is to figure out what's your own version of balance, and that typically ends up being the trick for each one of us.
And you mentioned something about the race to get to the Google Calendar.
Yes.
So tell us more about that race.
So at least now I have help, I have support staff. When my daughter was born, I had very little help, and it was a typical case of not having anybody to look after a young child. It happens with a lot of young mothers. There's very little help.
Sure.
So if any of us, between my husband or I, we had to travel, we were always sort of competing to book a slot on the Google Calendar so that the one who gets there first gets it and the other one has to babysit. So I think Google is amazing that ways. And there's not just Google, I think thanks to the mobile, a lot of your life is sort of always evolving.
Organized.
There is always something happening. You can communicate better.
Yes.
And I think these are big, big pieces of help available to each one of us.
I know that you come from a family where girls are traditionally not working women.
Right.
I read about that, and how you came from a family which was, rural family in Punjab, and you are the one who has broken the mold.
Right.
And before that, your mother.
Yes.
What is the situation today for women who choose to break the mold? Are there still more women restricted to the house, or do you think that they are learning to step out?
I think a lot of women are trying to step out of the boundaries that were traditionally set for them. I just came back from a trip to Jaipur, and I did meet a lot of women who are educated, who come from very well-off families, very exposed to everything else, but some family boundaries are still very sacrosanct, and especially in India. And women are learning to find a place where they can build their own road without disturbing the ecosystem in their family, without disturbing the balance. But to answer your question, there are tons of women out there, there are many women out there who are yet yet very much on the confines of the setup they were either brought up in or they got married into, or something that they wanted to do all the while but haven't done so. I see a sense of experimentation. I also see a sense of curiosity. I love what technology is doing to a lot of this. So a few years ago, you couldn't be an entrepreneur if you didn't step out of the house. Today, you can be an entrepreneur while being in the house. You can have a shop on the mobile phone, and that changes things. So a lot of women experimenting. I see that change a lot.
So as the first working woman in your family, let's put it that way, was it really hard? Were the challenges very overwhelming, or you just moved ahead like a earth mover, just removing everything from your path? And
so I did sort of move away. So I came to Delhi after I finished my school and started studying, started working very early, did a lot of things, did a lot of experimentation, did a lot of things at the same time. But the thing that I figured that I used to miss at some point was I would see a lot of people say, hey, my cousin works here and there, or my friend does so and so. I never had that context. In a way, that was empowering because you had nothing to benchmark with, which means you do your own piece, you move ahead, which I did. I just did my own thing without sort of doing it too much of pros and cons, and sometimes that kind of freedom is hugely liberating.
But you didn't have a peer group to share things with.
Yes, in fact, a lot of women I talk to, flexi moms, now talk about this to say, hey, we don't have women who work in our family, or we come from a family in Jharkhand, or we come from a family in Odisha where, everybody is, and especially in the corporate context. So women might be working. It's not that they're not working, but they're not sort of doing the office bit, they're not doing the career ladder, they're not doing the entrepreneurial bit. And that changes things. Once you have a context, you feel a little more backed up, right? You can call a cousin, say, how's this company? Or you can ask somebody for job advice, or you can sort of talk to somebody who'll say, how do you set up firms? And I see entrepreneurs, finding that a lot because there's nobody in the family who's done this before. So you go back to the ecosystem, you go back to industry bodies, things like that.
You come from a very prosperous family, I know. And where basically women were expected to simply marry and then settle down, and men were expected to just perpetuate the money in some manner.
Right.
Having seen that kind of prosperity, and now you are an entrepreneur of your own, and you have to create that wealth for yourself, physical wealth, material wealth, as well as a value system.
Right.
Where do you measure money?
Every time I think of money, the word that follows in my head is freedom. And somewhere while I've seen the traditional wealth or the traditional setups, I think the thing that they lacked, or the reason why that never attracted me, was the sense of accomplishment, the sense of freedom, the sense of being able to do what matters to you. The individualism is lost there. It's sort of a collective tone that has been set, and everyone's going to follow that, which in a way is nice, but especially when it comes to women, it sort of decontextualizes you. It puts you away from the system, and
you're just part of the ecosystem.
Yes, you're not a contributor.
Yeah.
You're not somebody who's growing the whole piece. Like these days, you see a lot of young women joining family-run businesses.
Right.
But that wasn't the case, and for me, money is a means to actually doing things you want to do. Money is a means to your personal freedom, your personal time. It's also a means to finding a lot of collective goals as either a society or as a team or as an organization. So as an entrepreneur, if you create wealth, not only a lot of people become rich, you've set some trends in motion, you've set some things in motion, and those things will go somewhere. Either some lives will change, or a new product will happen, or a new marketplace will happen. Something's going to happen as a result of that. So, and I think that's the difference between traditional trading sort of money and entrepreneurial money.
So, you've chosen to marry. you've chosen to have a daughter, you've chosen to have a Google calendar which you rush to fill. What do you think marriage means to you?
Marriage to me is really two things. One, it is shared values. That's the things that are dear to you are also dear to the other person, and it's a lot of companionship without having the frills of to-dos, have-tos, and the usual success parameters that sort of fall into the lap.
So it's a formal contract to bring two like-minded people together.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess a lot of sort of, and I see that a lot, especially in I think women a few generations before us, that the context for the man and the woman have changed. For example, a lot of men have progressed in their careers and women haven't. So they have no common conversation. Or love has vanished because you haven't talked about yourself. Or your context has changed but you haven't upgraded the communication about your context. And it's such a simple thing, but we do it in other contexts. We don't do it when in our personal relationships. And I also feel it's all right to sort of bring it up to speed and say, this is where it is and that's all right.
Those are real words of wisdom, I must say. But I'm going to trick you now.
Okay.
After your words of wisdom, I'm going to ask you my trick question.
Please.
And since you have a little daughter and since you're working outside the home, let me ask you hypothetically, Sairee, if your daughter had a need which compelled you to be at home, given that you are such a passionate founder of Flexi Moms and you've created this whole institution.
Right.
But if your daughter had a need that required you to stay at home, what would you do?
It's interesting you asked me this question. I thought about this a couple of times.
Yes, I'm sure, yes.
Because, and I get asked this a lot when I go to forums to say, how can you sort of preach flexibility or work at home when you're sort of out there? But I think everyone's life is in cycles. There are phases when we are on an upswing or when we are on a fifth gear, and there are times you need to slow down, and those are response to your context that one needs to constantly do. So I might reach that stage and I'll be very happy to do it. I might maybe work differently. I may choose to do different kind of work. I may maybe put in if I was to ask to do it today, I would do it very differently. I may need a tier 2 team for me, or I may need a set of generals to run the show. But I do see it happening at some point. I don't know when, and I'm sure it happens with all of us. And I see more and more men also doing this. You go in fast gear, you come down, you respond to what you want to do. I may not take a break maybe for my daughter. I may take a break to go out and do a PhD or do a fellowship. I really want to do that. So those things may happen, and it's fair. I think everyone's got the choice ahead of them. Yes. One just needs to prepare and do better at that situation.
Not take an emotional call, but take a realistic call.
Absolutely. So do I see myself sitting at home because I can't cook, I can't run a good home, I maybe can do some of the things that they're averagely. So what would I do with my time? I need to think about it. So for somebody who's so used to picking up the bag and going out and being on the road 10 days a month, I need to think about where does that time go in. So and definitely whosoever needs me doesn't need me 24 hours. So I need to make myself relevant and useful in whatever situation I am in.
Sairee, this has been a marvelous conversation. Thank you so much for coming on Beyond Pink, sharing your views with our viewers, and I hope to see you again.
Thank you for inviting me, Sangeeta. It was a pleasure being on the show. I so look forward to the Beyond Pink series. Thank you.
That was our today's Beyond Pink guest, Sairee Chahal. Do watch out for new episodes of the Beyond Pink chat show on this channel. Bye bye.